Well, in trying to recognize everybody's time, I don't want to wait too long. People will come on as we begin talking. And so I want to welcome all of you. I'm Don Wetruba, the Executive Director of MASB. I will be co-hosting this with Stacy Bogard from our Communications Department. She will help to moderate and call on people as you have comments or questions. We did the kind of the State of the Association 2 weeks ago, and 97% of you said an opportunity to share with each other was worth your while. And so I'm going to hold you to that. And I'm going to spend less time talking today and more time letting you talk back and forth about what you're doing in your districts. The way we decided to put these together after doing the initial call with all of you was to actually divide them into kind of subject areas. And today, based on kind of timing, we're going to be talking about what's happening with your education continuity plans in your districts, how they're going, what changes you're making on the fly, because I know districts are doing that. What are you hearing from your parents, and a list of others. We're going to follow that up with some conversations related to graduation ceremonies and teacher appreciation. We will also talk about budgeting as we come closer into the month of June. Not so much in the Jen Smith space where we're talking about budgeting where you're wondering about what the state is going to do, but actually having some conversations about budgeting, about what your plans might be at the district level, and having some conversations, again, amongst yourself in that space. If you were on last time, you'll be familiar about how to get recognized, but for those that weren't, 2 ways to be involved in this conversation. And this is going to be that we're not going to keep everybody muted. You can unmute yourself at any time that you want to speak. But to be recognized, you can either use the raise the hand function that is available for all of you. And if I remember correctly, raise your hand as if you click on participants. Am I right, Stacy?
You are correct.
Okay, that's right. Because I'm a co-host, I don't see that function. So if you click on participants, you'll see the option to raise your hand. And the other thing you can do is also type into the chat function any question, or not question, or any comment that you'd like to have. Or to be recognized to speak next. I will start just from a conversational standpoint. When we think about the continuity plans, I have 2 kids, elementary and high school level. We live in Grand Ledge, Michigan, and so we are seeing continuity plan that is for us working pretty well for our kids. Because of our district, there's a big component of Grand Ledge that is rural, so internet access is limited to, so the district actually in that case made a decision. They are not doing, they're doing almost nothing online other than delivering content to kids that want it through Google Classroom. In most cases, there's not any Zoom meetings with their teachers, unless it's kind of voluntary extra work, we'll read along in 4th grade or something like that. You can do packet pickup at the school district. But because of the nature of the district, they don't really have teachers even giving it as an option to do Zoom calls with teachers and other things along those lines. I have heard, of course, of other districts that are at the opposite end of that spectrum that are almost completely virtual. They're teaching their classes much like they would if they were doing it in person. And it seems to be going well in those districts. So I think today is trying to have that conversation of what does that look like. The other piece is we're coming up on a date that likely is going to put some people back to work, and we already have started seeing that, but we'll likely be seeing more of that. And what you're thinking at the district level about how that's going to work. Because right now we still have a good chunk of parents that are home facilitating for their kids, helping them learn. Once offices and other places open back up, as we get, in at least the last few weeks of school, have you put contingencies in place to help parents help their kids when all of a sudden they're not necessarily home during the day. So lots of thoughts in the continuity space, lots of, I think, positive stories. And so I'm gonna like kind of quit talking and move to that facilitation space and really, I think all of us would be interested in hearing from each other. And I'll start off with, for those that would like to speak, like, which way did you decide to do your continuity plans? You know, kind of like I just said with Grand Ledge, are you very virtual? Or are you very much, you know, packet delivery sort of thing? How do you feel it's working? And then we'll keep going from there for questions. So what I would be interested in how have you set up your continuity plans, and what are you hearing from your superintendents? What are you hearing from your parents on how those plans are going? Anybody want to throw out the first volley on that? Otherwise, I'll be forced to randomly call on you. Oops, we're back. I'm looking to see hands. I'm not seeing any. So Matt, I see Pamela Green just raised her hand. If you want to unmute yourself and share.
Hi, everyone. So in Farmington, we worked on a continuity of learning plan that allows remote access to our students. So they're doing Google Classroom, they're doing a lot of those things. We also did packets initially, but we've done 2 distributions of devices for students where they could come and pick them up. We've worked with local internet providers to make sure that our students had access that was cost effective, or they've actually in many cases waived the fee for families that did not have it. So our teachers are working with connecting both on an academic front, but we're also working on the social emotional piece as well. So we're doing a lot that connects in checking in with social emotional, what's going on, surveys, that kind of thing. We're also, as a board, we talked about accountability of checking in to make sure all of our students are participating. So teachers are monitoring and making connections to families if they see a student hasn't been logged in or isn't participating, turning in assignments, etc. We definitely had some pushback in relationship to credit, no credit, which is what we settled on as a district. And we're hearing different things from parents on how's it going. From parents are happy with it, other than they're challenged by managing several kids at home and different curriculums and keeping up with email messages from teachers and what time do they need to be in this Google Meet. So we're getting a lot of feedback that it's a management issue for parents at home, and as well as motivating students. We've heard credit, no credit has demotivated some of our students, but it's motivated others. So we're kind of all over the place with that. But as a whole, we've received a lot of positive feedback, and we've put a lot of information out to our parents in our community, and they seem to be pretty pleased with how things are going in these unprecedented times. So
you mentioned Google Meet. Are your teachers, where possible, actually trying to schedule class times so that at 10 o'clock on Friday, this is the class somebody is going to be in, as opposed to Monday is math day, Tuesday is social studies, or whatever process another district might have?
Yeah. So they have been doing some of that, and the challenge is they're having to coordinate together. So they're doing more, trying to do some PLC work even through Google, so that they're coordinating times, because I think they were overlapping, and that was a challenge to begin with too. So they weren't communicating as well as to what the expectation of, I've got class set up at this time where other kids already had something else going. So they're working out those bugs.
Thank you, Pamela. And Pamela brought up something that I've heard. I had actually a call from a district last week what they're finding is really it's a rural district, and they were getting really, I don't know if participation is the right word, because they are largely delivering packets, not doing virtual learning, but in returning of work by the students, they were under 50% of the kids actually turning their work back in that was being assigned, and they were doing credit, no credit, and wondering whether maybe they needed to bring the grades back to it, try to get kids to turn that in. So that's another piece that would be interesting to talk about is credit, no credit, grades, and are you seeing or hearing from your teachers that kids aren't turning in work or aren't participating in the virtual settings that you have created? Who's next would like to share what they're doing in their district and how, in fact, they're working?
We have Mark Katz, if you could share what district you're from.
Hey, Dad, I'm with Oakland Schools, and as the ISD, it was our responsibility, as I think everybody knows, to really approve the learning plans that each one of the 28 local districts that have. From what I'm hearing from talking to board members, are really kind of mixed comments. Some of them are using a lot of virtual learning, some of them are using the packets, and some are using a combination of the two. But I think the responses that Pam gave as far as how motivated the students really are of really doing things is something we're really hearing across the board from many of the board members that we've talked to.
And Mark, do you know at the ISD, you've approved the plans, and I know your ISD does a lot of other support with the locals. Have you had conversations about working with your locals to, within your county, either survey parents after the fact or other things along those lines, just to get a better feel for what has happened once we finish school in June?
And from what I'm hearing, that's one of the things the superintendents, and what the superintendents did was they broke into reference groups where each one of the groups kind of worked on different issues. And I know that one of the things they have talked about is how they're going to really analyze the results, once we get beyond the end of what we would think of as the current school year and into the summer, to really see how things went, how things might be done better should we ever run into one of these situations again.
Well, that is the big question, I think, for everybody is, we get through June and we're finishing this school year, but what does next year's school year look like? And that's still a big question. I talked to my counterparts in other states, and everybody's beginning that grappling right now and waiting to see where kind of the health situation goes throughout the year. But that is definitely an area that could lead us to be back in some sort of situation different than traditional learning. So that data of how we've done now is going to definitely inform what we do in the fall of the year too. We got a number of hands up. I'll call on Michael first and just introduce yourself and what district you're from and what do you have to share?
Mike Swickey, Wyandotte Schools. We're doing mostly virtual, only packets where necessary. There are some few situations where packets are necessary. The packets are delivered. We have the one-on-one initiative, so everybody's got equipment in the district. That was something we successfully did over the last couple of years, so that paid off well in this situation. In fact, we're having a meeting tonight and we're getting a state of the district address from the superintendent. But they saw this coming. Our superintendent is very proactive, and when this started, she got with her staff and said, what if, and had some contingency plans in place. So we were kind of ready for this to happen, and our tech guy is very, very good. So the transition for us, once the virtual started, was almost seamless. We didn't get one complaint the first day. we were expecting the phones to be going crazy. So it's been a success for us. It's not the same as face-to-face, and that's certainly one of the things I'm hearing from my grandkids and other folks and teachers, that they miss each other. They miss, we need human contact, and they're certainly feeling that now, and they miss the face-to-face. And this, I hope this never really replaces that, because I think that's very important. But we've been met with great success, and we're lucky we're going to be able to finish out this year and satisfy our 180 days, and trying to do all we can under the circumstances. And we're very hopeful that we'll be back in classrooms in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I see Hillary Baker asked a question in the chat. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong for those that are at the ISD, and I know we have at least one ISD superintendent on the call. My understanding is if you're making any kind of significant change within your plan, that you do need to resubmit to the ISD. And I actually see that Brad Banasek just chimed in on that one and confirmed what I suspected. So I see Barbara Reed has her hand up, and introduce yourself and your district and share with us.
Hi, my name is Barbara Reed, and I'm from Dexter Community Schools down near Ann Arbor. And one of the features that we have implemented is a weekly touch base with each student. And so for grades 7 to 12, that is the teacher will reach out to the student directly and see how they're doing. Or if the student has already contacted the teacher, then, you know, that's great. And then in the younger grades, the contact is made with the parents. And so I think that kind of addresses really a lot of things like, you know, they're going to talk about how you're doing overall. And then also, are you able to keep up with the homework, the assignments? Do you have any questions? And so I think that just, although it gives accountability in a way, I think even more than that, it just kind of keeps that relationship strong and makes sure that the kids and the families know that that we are connected if they have any questions or concerns.
Thanks for sharing that, Barbara. That, you know, that's a space where, as an elementary school parent, I do think parents are experiencing a lot of stress and trying to be teachers. Probably newfound respect for our teachers if they didn't have it before. But I do think that that stress can be, I think it can be helped when the teacher is reaching out to the parent and having a contact. And just, I mean, yeah, they might be sending information every week for their, you know, their normal assignments, but some other specific outreach that would tell a parent, I'm here for you, let's have a conversation, I think could do a lot to help just reduce the stress for the parent and thus make them engage better in the education process with their kids. I think that weekly reach out, kind of a one-on-one basis, could prove well, you know, prove to be a successful piece of the plan that you've implemented in your district. Other folks that have a hand up or would like to do some sharing? I see Ken Stahl has his hand up. Ken? Unmute.
Gotcha. Hi, everybody. I could mimic most of what's been said so far, but we have had anywhere from 100% plus or minus percent activity on the online as far as contacts with the kids. We're very lucky in that way that our community has a lot of connectivity here, and our community is extremely supportive. We did end up sending out 500, give or take, Chromebooks to our kids. We had a couple, about 3 Saturdays in a row where they, all of a sudden they decided, a lot of that is to parents are working from home, multiple kids. Hey, if you've got one, I could really use one. So that came in very handy. The pass or grade, we elected and actually made it official last week on one of our Zoom meetings that we would allow them to choose at the end of the year on that. However, to choose a grade, they would have to have participated 100% in the online learning. So we gave them that option because to some of them getting into colleges, they feel that that's going to be very important to them. Colleges will not, you know, they say we're not going to let it affect anything, but nobody really truly trusts that, just like we don't believe they're not going to increase their tuition every year. I would like to share, I don't think I see anyone here from the Clarenceville district. My wife teaches there. Our teachers in Brighton have been connecting at an incredible level and doing some incredible things. The creativity they come up with on screen, you see it on the TV, you know, but when you see it at home with your own teachers, it's pretty amazing. in the Clarenceville district, they are probably almost a polar opposite of the Brighton district, and I watch her interact with her students. They do not have nearly the connectivity in that district. She'll have a class of 35 and many times have 6 or 7 of them online. But the really cool part of this, and something I'd like to see it carried through in the next year for all the districts, this connectivity has brought some of the children that she was, you know, they're almost near failing all the time. They hang out at the end of those meetings. And then she has the opportunity to get to know them and find out that they're babysitting their younger brothers or sisters all day and really don't have time to do this work. You know, the one young lady, I stood on the side and listened to the conversation. It was kind of a tearjerker, but you know, she's 13 years old, taking care of a 3-year-old for her sister. She's living at her sister's house while she goes to work at Meijer. It's one of those stories that you'd see on the news, but you know, my wife all of a sudden, you know, realized, now I know why this child has been in this position. And she's starting to turn in her work online. And these connections, these social emotional connections are incredible. Something that there's not time for, or the child isn't prepared to do in face-to-face confrontation. So I've seen a bunch of that in her district, which is pretty amazing.
Thanks, Ken. You know, that 2 things that you've said, you know, I've talked to one other district that is doing the optional grading piece. You really see that amongst the high school kids if they're trying it. And I know that's an experience, and, you know, some might wonder why that option would be there. And my daughter and I, our family was on a walk yesterday or last night, and that came up. She likes this term geometry teacher, like she's just getting along better than she did with the last one. So, you know, she ended up with like a B+ last term in it, and she thinks she would have got an A in this term, and she won't get that average up now because we're in a no credit situation. And so that, you know, that option where somebody can pick either is something that I think is an interesting one. And the other one, you know, you mentioned your wife and teaching, and with the teachers that are willing to spend the extra time. I mean, I'm speaking to the choir. I think you all know this, but for a lot of kids, like, going to school every day is their safe space. That's their place to actually not be stressed. It's their place to, you know, be able to not carry the weight of the world on their shoulders, whether it be watching siblings or whatever it is. And so I think, you know, when a teacher can still connect virtually and allow them the space to just have conversations, you know, that's going to do a lot to, you know, help those kids continue to move through the process. And, you know, that is going to be our challenge. I mean, you will see this, and you're already, I'm sure, in your meetings talking about upcoming budget problems and what we are going to face. And you'll see this in my article in the Leaderboard magazine that'll be coming out shortly, is we're going to really be challenged this year, particularly if we are not back in a traditional school setting. But most of our parents will at least be back to work in the fall. At least that would be a general expectation, depending on the kind of size of the place they're working, is how are we going to, and when I say we, it's boards, administrators, and teaching staff and everybody. Are we going to get bogged down in the adult conversations that are about running the school? Or are we going to be able to manage to, you know, suck it up, hopefully for only one more year? And, you know, particularly, and this is a challenge, I think, to the teachers, to have that flexibility to stay on a Zoom call longer if we're still doing some Zoom work, to know that we might in fact see, you know, in some districts, pay reductions this year, but actually we'll be asking the teachers to do more. And that's a hard place to be, whether it's the board member asking that or the SUP or the teacher in that space. But that will make or break this upcoming year. And this is going to be our opportunity to make public ed shine to everybody, because we are focusing on the kids. But we also have great risk if we can't take this on. And we get kind of locked into our internal struggles. And I know that will happen. It is what it is. But those teachers are the ones that, you know, that will win out in their communities, and bond issues in the future will be easier to pass because people will remember what happened during this and the positive kind of aspect of that. I see Stephen Scoville has his hand up.
To answer your question, we're doing a combination of online classes through Zoom, and then we've also sent out packets with our bus delivery. As the weather gets nice and parents start to return to work, we're starting to see a drop in participation. The elementary's been as high as 80%, middle school is lower, and the high school's lower in that percentage rate. But it's our fear is as the weather gets nice and parents return to work, we're going to see a drop in participation. Two questions I'm trying to get answers to is one, in the original closure, there was the addition of 5 additional days for professional development. Has anybody utilized those to count as days towards the clock hour requirement? And then the second one is the CARES Act funding. Interested in what creative plans people have out there for that money in light of the budget woes that we're facing.
Thanks, Stephen. And I'll let others chime in on the question. I'll throw out 2 things on those questions. On the CARES Act money, we are still trying to work with the feds to figure out just how much flexibility you're going to have to spend that money. Most of it is right now tied to the cost of the implementation that you've done. And so most of the recommendations you're seeing right now are if you, had bought extra Chromebooks, if you have expended money in trying to, get to deliver your continuity plans, that as one-time funds, spend it on one-time things, because if you build it into your budget, that becomes a little bit more problematic. And I think a lot of districts probably don't have an answer yet to what they're doing until the Department of Ed is able to release that money and give greater guidance in the budget space. And I'm already blanking on the first question that you asked.
The first one was regarding
the 5 hours of, or 5 days of PD.
And the additional 5 PD days. Has anybody set up PD, requested SBCEUs, and is counting that towards student contact time?
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear. I know some districts actually use the 5 days prior to starting school. They counted it as instructional time, but brought their teachers together to provide PD during that period of time, and then are now moving fully into the school calendar. If others want to chime in on how they handled that, feel free to answer that question for Stephen on how you dealt with that within your districts. Any districts that, oops, my watch started talking to me. Any districts that have actually made a change in their plans over the last 3 weeks because of something you saw happening within the district, within the delivery model, that you made a change that you felt was necessary, that has worked well for you? I'd be interested, and I think others would too, just to hear what kind of changes are people making in their plans to try to better deliver the education to their students right now. Nothing specifically. I know a lot have probably stuck with it. We often learn a lot from each other and just learn to ourselves when we make mistakes or when we have difficulty. So I would be interested to hear from districts that have really experienced challenges in the delivery of their plans, whether that be connectivity, access, participation, parent problems. I think sometimes we sit there and don't want to share the negatives when we hear, oh, this is working well. Like everybody doesn't want to chime in and say, man, that's not us. We're hearing things from our parents that are very difficult. We're not seeing, our teachers aren't getting good participation. I think it would be worth hearing that side of it. I think we can often learn from that. I see that Hillary Baker has a hand up. If you'd like to share.
Yeah, I think the biggest one in our rural district is even when students do have devices, connectivity to the internet. Right now, trying to find hotspots is about as challenging as finding N95 masks. So that's really our big challenge is knowing that the CARES funding is coming. We're already trying to figure out how to really increase the connectivity of all of our students and the internet access. We're doing the hybrid model, so we do have packets as well as some online options for that very reason. But looking kind of into the fall, we're really going to have to figure out the connectivity. So even though they may have a device, doesn't necessarily mean they have access.
You're right. Hillary, a follow-up question on that. You mentioned hotspots and finding that. Are you saying that as in the district is trying to purchase hotspots to use, or just being able to put them in places within communities to have access?
So we are just trying to now just purchase some to be able to lend out. We applied for a grant. We've yet to hear. It was for a rural high school kind of mini grant. But just to even get to them, and then it's how do you distribute them? How do you keep track of them? Because of course you're paying also a monthly fee for the service on them. So we know that this is an area we've got to kind of figure out a little bit more, I think, as we move forward.
Thank you for that. I have been in conversation, you get, just like school districts, get contacted by 100 vendors during this saying that they can, solve your problems. And at this point, we have not, MASB, if we're ever going to endorse something, that's a very long process because we don't put our name on just anything. But if you notice on our COVID page within our website, we have a list of kind of resources, and pretty much if a district or if a company has contacted us and said, we're providing free curriculum, we're providing whatever, we're just putting their name on there for districts to click on and get more information. But I have been contacted recently, and I'm actually waiting for them to create the PDF that we can link to by a national company that is a vendor in the telecommunication space, and they actually are a device provider. So they actually work with Verizon and AT&T and Sprint, like any cell phone company. It doesn't have to be specific, but they are a company that does provide hotspots. They have a school bus hotspot program and some other things. And as soon as I have that, we'll be adding them to our resource link. As a company, I can't, other than looking at their materials and having some conversations with them, I'm not staking MASB's reputation on them, but at least they might be a resource for people to tap and say, hey, how can you help us as a district? And it either works for you or it doesn't. But that is a conversation we're having. And right now I'm just waiting for them to get us that information so that we can link it on our website. So, because that was one, when they called me, I said, yes, that would be a space that I think would be helpful. And I did also connect them with the Michigan Education Directory so they could reach out to every school district in the state of Michigan, to the superintendents, to let them know of their existence. They're actually a company that exists out of Florida. I see Dorothy Blackwell has raised her hand.
Yes, I just wanted to respond. We are also a rural district. We're Vassar Public Schools in the Thumb. We were able to acquire over 200 hotspots from Sprint at $19.99 a month, unlimited data. And, just because you got the hotspot doesn't mean you have the access. So just recently, they sent out a magic box, which came to us just today, that we're testing out, that's supposed to boost the accessibility for our hotspot. So this is something that's important to us as well, because we have a hybrid model. We're actually working on creating a map, a Google map that layers all our families' households and where we don't have internet access to help us write some grants, because it's going to be more of an infrastructure issue moving on in the future.
thanks for that information, Dorothy. That is, you know, statewide, that's a huge problem. I'm going to the UP this weekend. We have a place up there because that's where I grew up, and we have internet at our place, but my wife's working remotely, I'm working remotely, and we have 2 kids in school. So I'm actually going to take 2 days of vacation because there's no way that all 4 of us, because it's DSL access, there's no way all 4 of us could work at the same time. So it's just easier to let that happen, and my wife will probably take a day off and let the kids have internet access. But if you were to live there permanently, like in that district, and just like yours, that is a problem for a lot of the kids there that, you know, they don't have broadband, and they're trying to use satellite systems, they're trying to use cell service. But in rural areas, that can be pretty spotty. So a hotspot in your house that doesn't have good cell service doesn't do you any good. So, and that, you know, the legislature, and this is the problem that we're going to face, maybe at the federal level, and we've encouraged board members to contact our U.S. senators and our congressmen about the E-rate program. I don't know that the state is going to have space to really find the money. We're going to be in a pretty deep hole, I think. But the feds are really going to be the space, I think, to move money into our states to try to expand accessibility. We need to, particularly in rural and even the kind of rings just outside of the suburbs, in what some might judge as suburban, but they have big rural areas where the access is just not good for kids, even cell phone access. And we're going to have to see that expanded. And I think the feds are going to be the only way to get some funding into that space. It's nice for the companies that are trying to do things on behalf of school districts, but they're going to need some funds at some point. Mike, I see you have your hand up again.
Yeah, just briefly. And while this conversation was going on, I checked with the superintendent's secretary who fields complaint calls, and she said that they've been minimal and most have been Chromebook related, and she refers them to the tech department, and she hasn't any calls back. So we're assuming those have been cleaned up. Again, we're having our state of the district tonight, so I'm sure I'll learn more. But one problem that came through, and it kind of made me chuckle a little bit, but I get it. A teacher was having trouble with participation at the high school and realized that if she moved it later than 9 o'clock, she'd get better participation. 9 o'clock was a little too early for some of the high schoolers. So for whatever that's worth, I thought I'd share that.
Yeah, that seems like it should be obvious, but I mean, we know that if we were going to wave a wand and look at education research, we would start high schools at 9:30 in the morning. And having a high school daughter, it's a struggle to get her to go to bed at any time before midnight, just because of their clock just works differently. And you know, she would not do well with 9 o'clock, earlier than 9 o'clock wake up either. So you know, and that is that flexibility that I think, you know, the governor in her order when we moved to this, you know, this is a spring where, yes, there's going to be learning loss in a lot of districts. That will extend from the summer back into the spring during these continuity plans. And I think largely we're getting, rightfully so, both parents and us, even though we might not feel like it, we're getting kind of a pass. Like, this is not helping our kids through 7 hours of face-to-face class time, you know, and helping them learn. This is a little bit different. If we have to do anything like this in the fall, I think most schools are going to be moving much more in the direction of, we need to impart the same learning that we would have imparted if we were in a face-to-face setting. And, you know, those are going to be the instances where we're going to have to find that flexibility, whether it be, hey, because kids are at home every other day or whatever the situation might be in the fall, they're just not going to bed. And so we're going to have to start our classes later with them, because otherwise they just won't work well. Or now both parents are working, and the only opportunity they have to actually ask a teacher a question when they're actually working with their kid on the assignment might be the evening. And how does the teacher juggle that when they might have kids at home and they're trying to help their kids in the evening? So that time management, I think, is going to be a big space if, in fact, we're not back this fall in a normal learning setting. Mary Hanser, I see your hand.
Hi
Dan. Hi, everybody. Mary Hanser, Oxford Community School.
Oh, we barely, unless I'm alone, I think we barely can hear you, Mary.
Okay, let me take off. My apologies, maybe. Wait a minute. I apologize. My Bluetooth doesn't want to operate.
There you go. Now it's starting to come through.
Okay, let's see if y'all can hear me, or I'll plug in my other headphone.
Nope, we hear you fine.
Okay, so in Oxford, I've been looking a lot at the high school. My daughter's a senior this year. Our high school is doing classes. We're running our classes on Zoom in the afternoons. So they get first through fourth period 2 days a week, and fifth through seventh period the other 2 days a week. Wednesdays is an independent work day. And we go from 12 to 3:15. So we took into account the fact that high schoolers just don't get up in the morning when they don't need to. So that's been really helpful. Listening to a lot of parents, I think it's half and half. You know, some of them are really going bonkers, and that was some of the words they've used, just trying to keep their students motivated and doing the work, and other students just want to get up and do it. So just as different as all of our students are, so are our parents working with them, trying to get the work done. We've offered to students to be able to take their grade or to take a pass-fail for the grades. And the seniors, when we ended school in person, they are able to take the grade they have then, or they have 3 weeks to make up assignments, help to get their grades up, and they could also take it as a pass-fail. So we really try to put in as many options as possible to help these kids succeed. You know, and I think we've really done a good job recognizing that it's tough for everybody. You know, the teachers can't just get up and teach online. They have families too, and they have different situations at home. And we've really tried hard to respect everybody's time and attention and capabilities.
Thank you, Mary. That's, you know, I think always good when you hear about districts that are, you know, showing flexibility for the needs of the students and the parents. I think a lot of you are doing that. And I think hopefully coming out of this pandemic, and I'm not saying just in the fall, but in years to come, like it does help us look more critically at how we do school. And I'm not an advocate of you know, virtual learning and online learning necessarily, but I think in the flexibility space, in the you know, parents as a customer and students as a customer space, like these are all things that hopefully we can take some lessons from that make public education delivery in the future just better for those that are consumers of the product. And I know we don't like to think of ourselves that way, but that is what we're doing in the K-12 sector. And I do think that this is kind of a worthwhile space. We're about 15 minutes from when we're scheduled to wrap up. I'm happy to talk more about other thoughts in the continuity plans. You've covered a lot of the areas, and you know, for those that have shared where there's struggles, I think those are helpful. You know, particularly when I see Jill has asked a question. Did anyone amend their graduation credit requirements? Ours were 22 credits, and they took the board action to change to them the minimum of 18. Other districts that have changed graduation requirements because of that? Hillary, I see your hand up.
Yeah, what we did was we're on trimester systems. So when this shutdown happened, we were only about maybe a week into the third trimester. With our seniors, what we did is we went to the board. Some of our local requirements were waived. We also took into consideration some of the pieces in the executive order also got waived. And we went through and just made sure every student, we did an audit on every single senior. And, you know, if they met their MMC requirements, they were good. So under the trimester system, our board ended up reducing it from 33 graduating or credits down to 30. So we did take some action regarding that piece, but definitely there are seniors who are still working on MMC requirements. And we also, the board, when they passed the policy, this was not setting a precedent, that this is just a unique time, so that moving forward, we have that flexibility to kind of go back.
Thank you. And like others, you can answer questions like that in the chat function itself. Mary, I see your hand back up, and I wasn't sure if that was from before or if you put it back up to answer.
Well, actually, I had another graduation question.
Okay.
Which was, I'm just curious what kind of ideas are floating around. You know, we're not having our original graduation, obviously, at DTE. And our community is doing some fun things for seniors, but we have 500 kids in our graduating class. So it's kind of challenging to do anything kind of extra. Like our community is doing Adopt a Senior program where you can send gifts to one of the kids after they get put up. But I'm just curious what ideas are floating around. I know nothing is in concrete yet. Just curious about that.
People can chime in now. We are our next, I think it's our next episode. That'll be 2 weeks from today. Hopefully that's not too late for folks. We're going to spend that period of an hour trying to spend almost all of our time there talking about what are we doing for graduations to inform schools. And also we're going to spend some time talking, because we'll still have time within the month, to see what districts are doing in the teacher appreciation space as we're in that month. And I think innovative ideas in that space will be interesting to share with each other, because teachers are, you know, struggling like all of us to balance work, family, and everything else. So people can chime in right now if they want to on the graduation, but we will definitely be sharing more of that when we come back together in a couple of weeks. Let's see, any other hands up right now? Brigitte?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to MASB for hosting this. I am admiring what everyone's saying and how you're presenting it and how you seem to be owning what's going on in your district. And my question or dilemma, I can tell you a little bit about what's going on in Lake Orion, but we had nothing to do with it. We were told what was coming out after the fact. And one of the things that we're getting pushback from our community is what's going on in our high school. And we have block scheduling and a modified block scheduling going on. And we have 3 scenarios that are playing out for the high school students. And we have embraced the pass-fail for grading, unless the students choose grading, and none of this is set out to hurt the student, right? I think that's what everybody's after. But for those who are on our modified block schedule with the skinny, which is a class that lasts all year long, you will, essentially in this remote learning, be able to have 3rd and 4th term represented. For some of the block schedules, 3rd and 4th term will be represented. For some of the block schedules, only term 3 will be presented, and term 4 is being pushed off into the fall, unless you have a student who wants to pursue it on their own and take summer school, or to somehow be able to test out in the summer. And the pushback is coming in and coming back onto the board in that we've already gone through this once and the teachers are supposed to be doing this, and now you're not presenting it and it's slowing our students down. So we've got a bit of a dilemma, and I can't even defend it because we had 0 input on this going forward. And also, just to put this out there for graduation, I'm curious to know how many other board members are having actual conversations with their cabinet or administration about this, because I learned on Twitter last night that our graduation got postponed. So I would welcome feedback as to, and curiously enough, my superintendent doesn't understand why I'm upset about learning about that on Twitter. So I'm interested in hearing from people what your involvement is at this time. And I know there's no MASB level course, Pandemic 300, that we can take to learn this. I know we're learning as we go, right? So and I have great grace upon grace for everyone that's working their tails off to make this happen. And so as a board member, and I've connected with some people I consider my mentors, saying, What is reasonable here? What should I expect as a board member for my participation in what's happening in my district?
So, good questions. If anybody wants to chime in on that. I also know, I think I saw Howard with a hand up earlier.
It's not related to this. It's a totally different issue. If you want to change or you want to go back to Birkin.
Well, let's see if there's anybody that are, in talking to some board members prior to this pursuit, I can say that I think even in the requirement, in adopting the continuity plans, it was really a requirement that because this was a timing thing, they had to get them out fast, more in the consultation space. And I think that is what a lot of boards ended up with, which is, here's what the administration has kind of put together. It was shared. There wasn't a requirement that they're being voted on. And even when the governor's office talked to us before it was announced, from a timing perspective, we understood that trying to bring a board together for some who had yet to even have a virtual meeting, trying to require a vote on the continuity plans was going to be difficult. But I do think, and you're seeing people answer some questions, in the chat function that you can look at. But I do think that that's where it started. But then there should be like some ongoing communication, just like you would during the normal course of the year. And I think you're right, extending grace to the administration too is important because they're drinking from a fire hose right now. But that doesn't absolve them from engaging with the board and letting them know what's happening, at least before the general public gets to hear the same thing. We're almost at our time, so I will.
Don, can I?
Ken?
Don, can I ask? Brought my name up. Howard Barron.
I want to say who's speaking. Who's speaking?
Howard.
Howard, was that you?
Howard Barron.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Go for it.
Okay. Thank you. This is, I think, a little complicated question. I sent an email, I think, I've been in a communication with Brad Banasic. It's related to the exactly EO 35, and I think it's been replaced by EO 65 or 85, I don't remember which. Related to 65, thank you. Related to layoffs. When you have employees that are not fully utilized, bus drivers, paras, people like that, maybe some lunch personnel if you still have those in source. The EOs are a little bit confusingly written, and Brad had an interpretation, but he said that's just purely his interpretation. Other lawyers have different opinions. And what I was asking is if MASB, MASA, et cetera, can work with the governor in the new I looked in the new EO, the 65, and it had the same wording. And that same wording is in the continuity plan. So administration is very reticent to exercise that. But as we know, we're going to be getting foundation allowance cuts probably in a supplemental, and then definitely in we'll find out at the revenue estimating conference next week. But why would we not, if the governor allows us, lay off people which are not fully utilized, allow them to utilize the benefit that we paid for, which is unemployment insurance, and then the extra $600 coming from the Fed or the federal government? Why are we having people, so we need some guidance on what is the right answer so that we don't get sued.
Yeah, Howard, I was aware that you had, not that you were going to ask that question, but that you had brought that up with both Brad and Jen. MASA and MASB have reached out to the governor's office on the layoff piece multiple times. And we've asked for additional guidance. And at this point, they are where they're at. They're just not going any farther than what they've said before. And we're going to keep trying. And right now, this is all tied to, current year funding and the continuity plans and waiving the days. Brad will have to correct me. Once we move into the next school year, July 1, we then move into really a new budget space and a new kind of employment space. And so I think what we're really talking about is more layoff in the current year if we can to save some money. Beyond July 1st, I think school districts likely have that flexibility because it won't be tied any longer to getting the 180 days that are happening this year. We are going to continue to push on that. I just don't know if we're going to get an answer. And we've even brought it up with legislators to let them know that this is a wrinkle for districts.
Obviously, time is ticking and we only have, 60 days or so left in the school year. But the governor has laid off people at the state level.
Yep, she did a temporary 2-week layoff. Yep.
Right. So if you can continue to push this, because we're spending money that we desperately will need to pay for the deficits that will happen when we get the supplemental in this school year, and to pay for summer school and to pay for next year. So it just doesn't make any sense. And obviously we don't want to do this to our valued employees, but just financially, it just doesn't make sense. Thank you, sir.
Valid point. Ken, I'm going to have you as the closing person because I see your hand is up.
Thanks, Don. This is for Bridget. I listen to you. If I understand your conversation, it's a lack of information before the public has it. We had that issue about 4 years ago. We made it mandatory, or should I say requested, is more that our superintendent contact us in one way or form to let us know about this, because there were issues where we were getting called by media and had no idea what was going on. And you don't want to look like a fool, although sometimes it's easy. But he now, sends out a broadcast to the board. He's got a board group text, and he'll send something out the minute something happens. And he may say, if you get any contact with the community, here's what you can say. Sometimes he just lets us go with it, but it works really well. I understand your concern, because it is kind of embarrassing and difficult to deal with it if you are put in a position of, well, what's going on, and you have no clue. You got to get real political with your answer and not answer it, and make that phone call and say what's going on. So we've implemented that, and it's ran really smooth for us. It was just hey, we need to know. So, I'm done. And
all right, thanks, Ken. It's right on 1 o'clock. I want to thank everybody for participating today. I hope you picked up some information that might be helpful in your school district. I saw a lot of conversation coming through in the group chat about graduation and some other areas. So, make sure that you tune back in 2 weeks. We'll send out notice on that. That will be the one where we speak about graduation and teacher appreciation more in depth and share those stories and ideas, because it is one of those years where probably more than ever, with kids that lost much of the second half of their senior year, if there's a way to honor them in a way that they find memorable, it's going to be important as they move into their first step into adulthood. So thank you all for participating, and feel free if you have thoughts, comments about this or about anything else. You can email me directly at dwitruba@masb.org. Happy to chat with you at any time or share email to better provide you the service that you need from MASB. So thanks, and have a great afternoon.